everyone to number 25 of the Vets for Ukraine appeal. I'm standing in for Daniela tonight. She'll be joining later on as well. My name is Stijn Niesen. I'm very honored to be part of the group of veterinary specialists that decided to take action to raise awareness for what is going on in Ukraine at this moment in time. And we opened with a very nice introduction made by our artistic director, Paolo, the other half of Daniela. Because today is the the first broadcast since the start of Pride Month. And Pride Month is all about being free to be who you want to be. And Ukrainians want to be free to be Ukrainian. And that is what is at stake in this unjustifiable war. It's day number 100 of this atrocious invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It's 100 days of suffering, 100 days of people having to flee away from their own homes. And this is exactly why we're doing this. Tonight we've got a fantastic presentation coming up, like other nights, of hugely high quality. A little bit more about that later on. But firstly, I would like to introduce one of our colleagues, also a specialist, Dr. Alison Moores. She is a board-certified surgeon, and she's not here to talk to us about what fantastic work she does during working hours, but she's here to talk to us about something differently fantastic that she and her family are doing just now. So Paolo, if we can have Alison join us in the studio tonight. Hello, welcome Alison.
Hi there, Stijn, thank you.
And thank you very much for contacting us just 20 minutes before this live broadcast. And that's just how we like it. So you sent us a message because you wanted to share your story, hopefully encouraging and stimulating others to do something fantastically similar as what you are doing. Because tell us, what's happening in your house at this moment in time?
Yeah, so I've been hosting a Ukrainian family for the last month, and I was prompted by just at the vital moment I lose my signal.
We can still hear you, Alison.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got spinning things. So good job.
Yeah, but it's going amazingly well. So keep talking.
I'm going to keep talking. So tell me if you can't hear me. Yeah. So yes. So I was looking at the pictures on the internet and just reminding myself about how bad things are, because I think it's very easy to not notice what's going on, particularly with some of the news moving to what's happening at home. And I've realised that it's been 100 days, and the city of Kharkiv, where my family comes from, has only had 2 days without some sort of shelling or bombing or rockets or dreadful things happening. And there's a lot of people still in Ukraine who want to leave. Facebook is covered with requests from families saying, please, can you take us? We're scared. We've lost our homes. And I realised, talking to people, that a lot of people are either daunted by the prospect of hosting and haven't jumped into it yet, or they don't know where to find a family, or they can't host but don't know what else they can do. So we decided quite early on that we would want to host, and we went to a talk in the local church where people who were running the meeting said they would help us link with a family, and it just didn't happen. And after, I think it was probably 6 weeks, actually we'd become a bit immune to the war because we were seeing the same things. I wasn't following it as closely. And I suddenly thought, do you know what, I need to do something.
Yeah.
And I saw a link on Facebook to a site for people trying to match families in England with families in Ukraine. And I answered a post from a random lady on there. Actually, turns out that she's a client of the practice, as these things often happen.
It's a small world.
Matched me to a family that night. And the only question they asked was, do you have schools? And we chatted via Google Translate on Messenger. And I answered a swapped a few messages, and we did that for about 2 hours. Later that night, I said, "Do you want to come?" And by the next morning, I had a message, and this chap just sent me all the documents for his family. So he sent passports and birth certificates, all of his financial records.
By an email or?
Just by messenger. So he sent me everything about his family, and then sent me his family. So it took us, it was really quick actually. It took 6 days for us to get the visa. The visa process was pretty easy once I'd figured it out. They were still in Ukraine. They were in a slightly safer part, but as they say, nowhere's safe.
Yeah.
And they left a week and a half later, and we joined a little a Life 360 group so we could see what each other was doing. And I watched the little dot moving across Ukraine on a bus, and I found it really difficult. I watched them go around Kyiv and past places that I thought were quite dangerous, and it took them 30 hours on a bus to get to the Polish border. It took them 48 hours to arrive in the UK. And I've seen lots of pictures of people meeting their families at the airport and lots of really fun selfies. And it's not like that for everyone. So some families are distraught because they're leaving behind husbands and fathers. They're walking away from friends and family members who died. Sorry?
And this particular, so it's a mum and a child. So are they leaving people behind?
Yeah. So men cannot leave Ukraine unless they're older than 60 or have 3 or more children. So women are coming to keep their children safe because they're afraid they're going to die or see things that children shouldn't see. And they don't want to be here. They just want to go home. I know some people are nervous that they're going to be the sort of refugees who want to come and stay forever. And, you know, that's a different topic altogether. But they are women who are afraid for their children, who are afraid to leave their husbands behind. They're terrified of their husbands behind, some of whom are fighting, but they just want to keep their children safe and to have a normal life. And it's amazing.
Yeah, if you truly put yourself into their shoes, if you really genuinely put effort into thinking about what they would be thinking whilst getting on a bus, driving away from your hometown, from your family, to you don't know even to where, then if you really put yourself in that position, then I think you understand a slight bit what's going on there, and not even the complete picture.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't know who we were. I sent a photo to show who we were, and that was the extent of what they knew of us. They knew nothing, but they put their trust in us. And for us, it's been a wonderful experience. I can see that we're generation. I know that they're all struggling those doors, and I know they're upset, and it's a struggle. But it's not difficult for us, and when it is difficult, I try to remember that is live with some extra people in my house who they might annoy me, and that's the worst that's going to happen. But I haven't fled a war zone, and I have a home. And for some people, there's no home to go back to.
Yeah.
So I think really I wanted to come on and say a few things. Is that firstly, if anyone is struggling to match with a Ukrainian family, people are very welcome to get in touch with me, and I can talk through how to do it. The second is it's very easy to live with people who are displaced if we think about how it's harder for them. You know, we've lots of space in the house, but our dinner times are one conversation in Russian, one conversation in English. The mum in my family, she looks after her kids, I look after mine, but we're doing it in parallel. We cook together, we eat together, we spend time together. It's really very nice. And I hope they'll go home, and I hope they'll go home soon, because it would be lovely for the war to end. But I've gone into this thinking it may well be a year rather than 6 months. I hope it's not any longer for their sake. But it's just really nice to make the difference. And if you've got the space, you can make the difference to one person or 2 or 3 people. And if you can't manage it, then you could potentially find someone else who's hosting and ask them what you can do to help them. So I've had people dropping in some meals and some bikes and all sorts of things just to make it a little bit easier for us.
Yeah. So in fact, what you're saying is that it in fact is enriching your life, and perhaps your own family is realizing how lucky we are in our safe houses, in our safe countries as well, more than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I said my kids from the outset, rather than giving them the choice, I told them I wanted to do this and said to them, this is something that you'll look back on when you're older and say that you did your bit for humanity. But also they're fun. It's been a long time since I've had a 5-year-old in the house. It's great fun, keeping us young, keeping us entertained. Yeah, it's definitely enriched our lives. Yeah. Not every day, it's not.
So
it's
in
not perfect.
In one line, so we have Paolo, our marketing creative director star, who can always make a nice a video out of what we say here. So if you can give us 1 or 2 lines, if you would call out to people listening in, watching in Europe, in the rest of the UK, anywhere really, how could you recommend more doing this, making the active decision of hosting a Ukrainian family? What would you say? Why should we be doing this?
Cool. I wish I'd thought to prepare this. I think it for me was just to make a difference and to walk in someone else's shoes. And if I was there, I would hope someone would open the door and offer me a little bit of safety for a while, and safety for my children, because that's what I see the mothers doing, is trying to stop their children seeing what they've been seeing, and also there are children who are dying still in Ukraine. There are civilian children who are still being killed this week, last week, and if we can get some of those children to safety, we might save some lives.
Yeah, and isn't that an honor to be able to be part of, right? To make it life-changing difference for these very unfortunate people. And like you said before, I mean, it could well be that within our generation we will be in that situation. We'll be highly dependent on somebody else, just saying, I don't care about the fact that I've got a few more people sitting at the kitchen table. I don't care having to wait for the shower a little bit longer, because actually I'm helping people and saving lives in the process. So thanks very much, Alison. Daniela has joined us as well. Daniela, welcome.
Hello. Sorry I was late today. I was in the motorway. Hi, Alison. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stein, for taking lead of this, I think, 25th episode of That's for Ukraine 2022. And I was listening, very interested, because what you are doing, Alison, is amazing. So is more and more people should do this if they have the possibility. I know in Europe they are doing this. I have friends that are doing this. Probably, I think it might be a bit easier considering the visa and all this. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying something that doesn't make sense. But anyway, this what Alison is doing is great, and this adds to what, just to say that everyone can do something. Everyone can make the difference, even from the very small everyday actions to more greater things. So and by now, with our campaign, with our fundraising, we are at 13,297, thanks to the donations that arrive from Matteo's live webinar, which was very successful. So now we just need £3 to reach the 13,300, but even we would like to reach the 13,500 actually. And today we have a great speaker. Is an internal medicine specialist, is YAIZA FORCADA, and she will talk about cats and IBD, if there is any alternative to steroids. But before allowing YAIZA to enter in our live, I would like to remind you to share the link to everyone. So just share to as many people as possible so that we can raise as many money as possible. And if you can donate, it doesn't matter. There are other ways to help our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, exactly like Alison is doing right now. So, but if you can, if you are in a financial position, just please show or tell us how you enjoy. If you are enjoying us, just give a little bit, because every little helps. And another a little thing that I would like to remind is that we are going live now, but this is a session that is registered, recorded, and you can find it on YouTube, has all the other webinars that have been done until now. And we are going live on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So we have the little pill of today that Paolo is reminding me that we should launch now. So Paolo, please, can we launch the pill of today?
Mommy, can we stay up late tonight? Please? Love you, Mommy. Bye.
Surprise!
Surprise! Hello. I have a question for you. What are your favorite animal? And I love you, Mommy. You're the best mommy in the world. Bye.
Surprise!
Surprise! Hello. My question is, when did you know you wanted to be a vet? I love you, Mommy. Bye.
They are so sweet. They are so amazing. Okay, so let's see if we have made YAIZA emotional now. Can we let her in? Hello, YAIZA.
All that hard work, we in tears.
Well, a little bit. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it, so.
You were not? You should be used to our surprises, no?
Yeah. Very
So,
nice.
thank you, YAIZA, to be here with us. We know each other since we used to work at DHT. I don't remember now how many years ago, but at some point our lives separated. And do you want to introduce yourself, or shall we ask actually your partner in crime to introduce you? Yes, it's time. Go ahead.
So tonight we've got YAIZA FORCADA, a real admirable person, and we can read out her CV. It will take a long time, but she's originally from Spain, did an internship there, then went and took the ferry to the United Kingdom to do an internship in London. So second internship, then a residency in Liverpool, then a PhD at the Royal Veterinary College. Indeed, worked at the Animal Health Trust, at Davies, veterinary specialist, and ended up once again at the Royal Veterinary College as well, where she's now an honorary senior lecturer in internal medicine. And together with myself, we are sort of heading an own company now, trying to provide a supportive environment to every vet anywhere in the world. But she's more than what you can read on paper. She's one of the most honorable persons that I know of, always seeking the truth, always passionate about trying to make a difference for the right reasons. And therefore, I'm not surprised whatsoever that she's sitting here tonight, because, Vet for Ukraine hits that mark that she likes to hit, in terms of standing up for the underdog. And at this moment in time, Ukraine is the underdog, but together we can make them survive, and not only survive, but also win. And that's what we're here for. But YAIZA FORCADA, excellent speaker, as we can see. Even Daniela is
I know how it feels.
Is giving up. Excellent speaker, and as you can see, an excellent mum as well. And so, YAIZA, welcome to the studio before I choke and die.
I may need to run and do CPR on him in a minute.
Well, another thing you're very good at.
I had the same problem when Stefanos was our guest with Jackie, and out of the blue, I just had to cough, and I was choking really live. And so, don't worry, Stein, you don't have to choke now. I can. you can relax. Okay, so we are going to talk about IBD in cats, which is very, very interesting, in particular because I have 4 cats and 2 of them are vomiting. So either they have IBD or they have low-grade lymphoma. So I'm very interested in listening what you are presenting today. So I think the audience is yours. Thank you so much. And don't forget, people, to donate if you want, and look for the link, www.justgiving.com/vets4Ukraine. Donate and help us helping our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. YAIZA, all yours.
Thank you very much, Daniela and Stein and Paola, for for introduction, but also for making this happening. Making this happen for everybody. So I'm really grateful that you guys got together and that you guys are just continuing with this. I think it's really admirable, and I think it would be very easy to just make a very short effort, but you guys are in here for the long run, week after week, multiple times per week, and just keeping up with with work and with loads of other things. So I'm just really grateful, and I want to say that to you guys, because I think you guys are really brave, and sometimes we miss a bit of bravery in this world, and you guys are an amazing example to all of us, and I really hope this is making a difference, and I know it is. But so I want to make a quick appeal, actually, because I haven't made any appeal yet, and I think all my colleagues have. So I'm going to just say that everyone is very touched by this situation, of course, or we would hope that everyone is, and everyone has got some link to Ukraine or something like that. And to me, hearing that this war in Ukraine was happening was quite a shock. I've always had a bit of a soft spot in my heart for Ukraine. We had a Ukrainian boy that we shared a few years of our childhood with, a few summers. He came from Chernobyl, and he was an orphan. So he had lost his mom and his dad, and he lived in an orphanage. His grandma was alive, but she was only able to look after his younger brother. And he was able to join a program that helped them a little bit, give them a bit of happiness and a little bit of good food, and a little bit of good nutrition and sun, because in Chernobyl the situation was quite difficult at the time, as it still is, but a little bit less, hopefully, or just before the war started, and it wasn't quite as dire in terms of health situation. But anyway, he came, and his name was Genia, and he spent a lot of summers with us. We shared a lot of amazing experiences. He was a nice boy, a bit cheeky as well, a bit naughty at times. He used to gang up with my brother and play some pranks on me and all those things, and at the time I found it quite annoying. But of course, we learned to live together, and we spent those summers together, and we were in touch also with his grandma, and it was a really nice time, and I felt like I was also making a difference, and that's interesting what Alison was saying before, that it was also a very good experience for her kids, and I think it will be, because it made a really big difference for me. We met his brother as well. He came over a couple of years to our family, so we were two more for a few summers in our house, and we lost touch with him. Unfortunately, we kept in touch for a few years afterwards, but we lost touch. We know he had a daughter, and we don't know where he is at the moment. We've tried to find him, and we don't know where he is, and we can only hope that he's safe and that his family are also safe. And I can only imagine that's just one name and one example and one family, but there's many more that are in a really horrible situation and a really horrible war. And we can only hope to help a little bit. And I wish that we could do more. Everyone wishes they could do more, but I think this is already great. Any effort is really beautiful and is really valuable. And I'm just doing this for them and for everybody in Ukraine, for every family that may be in the same situation that the family of Genia is probably at this time. And anybody who is watching this, if you have any spare any spare cash or money, or if you can donate anything, that would be really appreciated. I think that people will really value it. So thank you very much, and I hope this talk is of a good standard for you all. I hope it's useful anyway.
It will be. It will be. It will be an exceptional one.
Very good. So I'm going to now start sharing my screen, and let's have a look. Oh, I think I'm already sharing my screen. Can you guys see?
No, we don't see you. So we see you, but not. Oh, yes. Now we see the presentation. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So so I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to talk about a very I suppose difficult disease that is very common, that will affect a lot of our feline patients in their lives, and it's feline IBD. And a lot of people sometimes it's a very challenging disease to control, really, and to treat and to manage. And sometimes we really reach for the steroids really quickly, and they are incredibly useful. But at times they just don't really make as much of a difference as we would want. At times we can't really give them because there are other comorbidities going on. There are other diseases present that stop us from being able to give steroids. So I want to just give a little bit of information about things that have worked for me and things that haven't worked quite as well. But I just wanted to first talk a little bit about what inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, is. So it's, of course, an inflammatory chronic enteropathy, and things are changing name a little bit. So at the moment, IBD is a type of a chronic enteropathy, and what we essentially call IBD is one type of enteropathy that is associated with inflammation and that cannot be controlled with antibiotics or with diet. And then there's other bit of the spectrum, which is lymphoma, like Daniela was talking about with her cats, but we'll get to that later. But usually to diagnose IBD, it's kind of a histopathological diagnosis. So you kind of need a biopsy to confirm the disease. And it is idiopathic in nature. There's no single factor that we know causes the disease in itself. But we are now discovering more and more about it. And we can see that there's 3 pillars that the health of the small intestine or the gastrointestinal tract is based upon. So one of the pillars is the immune system. Another pillar is the diet and everything that comes in with the diet. So also the antigens that come in, the nutrients. So everything that is linked to the diet, not just the type of diet itself, but also breaking it down into its components. And then the microbiome. So all those microbes that live in the small intestine, and the 3 of those pillars, so the immune system, the dietary factors, and the microbiome are really talking to each other. And sometimes they can understand each other really well, but sometimes, it's like, one is speaking English, the other one is speaking Spanish, and the other one is speaking Dutch. And we have a lot of that in our household, and sometimes a bit of a mess. So when they are not talking the same, when they are not understanding each other, is when we can have one of these chronic enteropathies or one of these inflammatory diseases. So anything can go wrong. So if if something in the microbiome goes wrong, then the way that the diet is digested will get affected. The way that the immune system reacts to the diet antigens, but also to those bacteria that are not present or present in excess, will also change. So everything is really linked with each other. The failure of one of those factors can induce a failure on the other 2 factors. They are so interconnected that it's almost impossible to separate them from each other. So that's a very important concept, because if we know what fails, and if we know that there's 3 big factors that are there, we can then think about interventions to try to adjust one or the other, or perhaps those 3 factors at the same time, to try to manage the disease a little bit better. So the clinical signs typical of IBD usually is a disease that appears in adult cats, usually around 7 years. That's the median age, more or less. And there's different talks about whether there's a predisposition or not. Some people say that the Siamese cats are predisposed. Some other papers talk about Abyssinian, but it's a pretty homogeneously distributed disease in the cat population. Some cats will have intermittent chronic signs, so they will have periods where they are not eating so well or vomiting, and then it tends to get better. And then the owners never really bring them to see us because, it's gotten better. So, when this happens again, then it will get better again. And by the time they come to us, they probably have been having clinical signs for quite a while. So I think that's an important thing to also ask the owners about. Because this happens slowly and progressively, cats come to us sometimes in a very underweight body condition, because they just lose weight really slowly, and it's something that goes under the radar of the owners. The main clinical signs are therefore weight loss, because it's a chronic disease that, when we have a look at the weight and we look at the history of that cat, they've probably lost about 1 kilo in a year or something like that. So something pretty dramatic, but something that the owners haven't really paid that much attention to, because it has happened very little by little. So that's one of the most common clinical signs. And then the second most common clinical sign is vomiting. So about 70 to 80% of the cats with IBD will vomit. And their appetite will be also quite variable. So anorexia with, intermittent ups and downs will be present in 60 to 70% of the cats. This is an interesting comparison because diarrhea doesn't happen that often. So about half of the cats with IBD will come with diarrhea, but that's actually not that common. And if we think about IBD in the canine species, the vast majority of them will have diarrhea. So that's a very interesting thing to remember about cats. Some cats will actually come with increased appetite, so they just feel perhaps some discomfort in their abdomen, in their GI tract, and they feel that if they eat more, maybe it would be helped more. So they just eat more. Some cats will come with PUPD as well, but the key signs are weight loss, anorexia, and vomiting. Those are the most common clinical signs. And I think if you look at those common clinical signs, which cat that comes to see us in the clinic doesn't have weight loss or anorexia or vomiting? Those are very non-specific clinical signs, and that makes it quite challenging, I suppose, to diagnose, because we really have so many diseases that present in the same way that we need to have a way of excluding those. And that's why approaching the diagnosis in a very systematic way is important in those cases. Evaluating the clinical signs is also very important, and trying to grade the clinical signs is very helpful, because this is a disease that is chronic, and it's a disease that we don't really manage to cure. And that's also a very important thing that I always tell the owners. We're going to manage the disease, and we're going to hopefully make your cat better and feel better, but we're not going to make your cat 100% cured. And it's always important to try to find out how severe the clinical signs are at the beginning, and then start treatment and start looking at what effect that treatment is having, because that will help us really objectively evaluate what effect our treatment is having and if we need to change strategy. So in order to help with that, there are some of these feline enteritis activity index circulating out there. Those have been validated for cats. And then what we can do, usually, those activity indexes usually talk about gastrointestinal signs. If you manage to do an endoscopy, etc., you can add whether there are endoscopic lesions or not to the score, but you basically get a score at the end of just doing this activity index, and then you can compare it with the cat after treatment, and hopefully that score should be going down. And if it isn't, then we need to look at strategies to improve. So we need to add something probably to our steroids, etc., to think about what we're not doing well. But what are we going to find in cats with IBD? So usually they can be quite lethargic. Sometimes they are a bit dehydrated, especially if they're having diarrhea or really severe vomiting. Their body condition is poor. Their coat is usually just dry and a bit matted. It's not the usual shiny coat that we are used to seeing in healthy cats. And palpating the abdomen really makes it obvious, because the intestinal loops can feel quite hard sometimes, like if it's a bit of rope that we are palpating. And of course, that's not present in every cat, that they are like rope, but by feeling healthy cats and cats that come to you for vaccination, etc., you can easily start noting the difference between cats that have some sort of a more inflammatory pattern in there. So how do we approach the diagnosis? I've said the clinical signs are super non-specific, and I've said that there's lots of different things that can be going on that can be creating or giving us the clinical signs. And it's usually what we call a diagnosis of exclusion, which means it can get a bit expensive sometimes. And I think we can save some money. And I'll talk a little bit, for those cases that are financially a bit more limited, what we can do. But I think what we usually want to do is we want to identify non-GI conditions. So we want to make sure that the cat is not diabetic, and that's why the cat is losing weight, that the cat is not hyperthyroid, that the cat doesn't have CKD. And you can also, depending on how you look at it, you can consider liver and pancreas outside of the gastrointestinal tract. It's controversial because they all work really close together. But you would also potentially look at whether there's pancreatitis, whether there's liver disease. If you find a combination of GI issues and then pancreas and liver disease, you can be talking about triaditis, which is a very common finding nowadays, but I'll park that a little bit on the side for now. So the step one is to do that, so try to rule out non-GI causes. The step two is to try to rule out other GI causes, so perhaps parasites, perhaps the presence of a food allergy or intolerance, bacterial causes, and things like lymphoma. And then the step three, some people would include some biopsies there. But just one thing about triaditis, it's a very common thing, and you've probably heard about it. It's very common in cats, and it looks like a very high percentage of cats has got inflammation in multiple organs in the abdomen, and those organs more typically are the pancreas, the GI or the intestine, and the liver. I think that I find that term a little bit restrictive, because we are talking about triaditis, and it really needs to mean that all the three organs are involved. But actually, some studies out there have shown that that this is not the case all the time, that there are some cats with just inflammation of two of those organs. So why don't we call it biaditis? I don't know, but it looks like I call it biaditis. I don't know. People think you know, people may think I'm weird, but it doesn't matter. 2 organs can also be involved. It doesn't have to be the 3 of them. And it looks like in a recent study with 47 cats, so 27 of them were symptomatic and 20 were asymptomatic. About 60% of those cats, so also the asymptomatic ones, had inflammation involving more than 1 organ. About 34 of those had IBD and cholangitis, so intestinal and hepatic inflammation. About 6% had IBD and pancreatitis, and about 17% of those had triaditis, so inflammation of the 3. So if we look at, I don't know why we call it triaditis, because a higher percentage of cats has got inflammation in 2 of the organs rather than 3. But anyway, I will fight that battle another day. But I think what we need to realize is, first of all, those cats with more severe clinical signs are more likely to have inflammation of the 3 organs. And I think that paying attention to the clinical picture is very important, because there may be lots of cats out there with inflammation in those organs, but if they're not clinical, then we don't necessarily want to treat it. And paying attention to what that cat is doing. Is that cat more suffering from diarrhea? Is that cat more suffering from anorexia? And then I need to consider giving an appetite stimulant. Is that cat having a very severe neutrophilia? And I need to consider a cholangitis. And I then need to consider antibiotics. So paying attention to the clinical signs and the other findings can really help guide our treatment strategies as well. And sometimes we don't really have the luxury of having biopsies. So being aware that on cats with very severe clinical signs where we strongly suspect IBD, there could be also involvement of other organs, and more likely the liver is the most common one that we can see. So in terms of trying to rule out issues with away from the GI tract, we usually would do a CBC. So we look at, whether there's an anemia, whether there's an increase in eosinophils, whether there's a lymphocytosis that would perhaps suggest something more sinister, perhaps like lymphoma. And we could also do a biochemistry. The biochemistry it's not going to really help us diagnose IBD, but it's going to help us exclude other conditions. So if you can do a biochemistry profile, perfect. If not, we want to exclude mainly diabetes, and we want to exclude mainly liver disease and kidney disease. So we want to look at the liver enzymes, urea and creatinine, and we want to look at the glucose. And that would be already a way of saving some money if the finances are a little bit tight. Albumin is always good to know, because it can give us an idea of the possible consequences or impact that that disease is having on the cat. Interestingly, cats don't tend to have the obvious PLEs and protein-losing enteropathies that the dogs get. So the albumin may be a bit low, but it won't be really as low as we are used to seeing it in dogs. It can happen, but it's very, very rare. You can do a fecal, and in cats it's very important to make sure that you're excluding trichomonas, trichomonas fetus. You need to do a PCR for that. Giardia is kind of mentioned in all papers, but I just think that it's not a very common disease. It depends also on a very common parasite that causes active disease. It may be important in some cats depending on their lifestyle. So important to bear it in mind if cats spend a lot of time outside, and if they live perhaps near farmland and things like that. Total T4 is a disease is a hormone, of course, that tests for hyperthyroidism, and that can be present in cats, especially more geriatric cats, and that can cause vomiting, weight loss, and sometimes polyphagia and things like that. So important one to rule out. I think if we have a 6-year-old cat, hyperthyroidism is not going to be very high on our list, and hopefully our physical examination will have helped us to see whether that's an option or a differential diagnosis if there is a thyroid goiter. So, I mean, important if appropriate, but again, depending on the age of the patient, is not necessarily something that we need to run in all cases. The step 2, as I was saying, once we try to exclude things that are in the GI tract or outside of the GI tract, then we're focusing within the GI tract. So we're looking at the stomach, the large intestine, and the small intestine. Some people may want to look at liver and pancreas in here, especially pancreas, because liver, we will have already looked at it with the biochemistry. So in order to look into the GI tract a little bit better, or not into, but outside, we'll be doing ultrasound, and ultrasound is a very useful test, which again doesn't confirm IBD, and I think that sometimes is probably, sometimes when things like endoscopy are not an option, we really need to be guided by ultrasound images, and I understand that needs to be the case, because sometimes we can't take biopsies, or sometimes we've got a 15-year-old cat that we don't really want to anesthetize to do the biopsies or the endoscopy. So ultrasound can be really useful, not only to give us some information about is the GI tract in, is it in thicker than it should be, the intestinal loops, where is that thickening, are there some areas that are more affected than others, and can I have a look at the other organs as well? Am I sure that this cat doesn't have a big mass somewhere else, or a big lymph node somewhere that would be more suggestive of lymphoma, or if we are in the US, things like fungal diseases and things like that. So it really helps us hone in a little bit more into the GI tract. It can also help us make a decision if we are going to take biopsies, and if we are in front of one of those lucky cats that gets biopsies because finances allow and things like that, it can really help us decide which type of biopsy we're going to take. So if what is affected is the duodenum, then I'm going to be able to do endoscopy. But if what I see most affected is the jejunum and the proximal ileum, then actually endoscopic biopsies may not help us that much. So ultrasound is really, really useful because it gives us information that is multidimensional. It gives us information about the GI tract, about other organs, and it also helps us plan further treatment if necessary. What other things can really help us hone in more into the function of the GI tract, of the gastrointestinal function? So those are the typical folate, cobalamin, and things like that. So folate is a vitamin that gets absorbed in the proximal small intestine. If it's low, then it indicates malabsorption. If it's high, then we don't worry about it. The cobalamin gets absorbed further down, so in the distal small intestine, and if it is low, then it's suggestive of malabsorption or pancreatic insufficiency. If it's high, there's no clinical significance. Something very interesting is that many labs come up with a reference range for cobalamin of about up to 250 nanograms per liter or so. And then if we see that the cobalamin is not below the reference range, we tend to say, well, they are not, it's not low, so I don't need to supplement. But there was a study done in which it showed that as soon as the cobalamin goes below 400 nanograms per liter, there is increase of certain metabolites in the cell, so methylmalonic acid, and that's something that only happens when there is not enough vitamin B12. So whenever we have cobalamin that is below 400, we always supplement, and that's within the reference range. But if it's below 400, we need to start supplementing, even if it still falls within the reference range. Blood test of pancreatic function, if we didn't do them in the step 1, then we could consider doing them, and that would be the FPLI and the FTLI. And I don't even know why I say pancreatic function, because they are. So the DLI will be a marker of pancreatic exocrine function, so that's a good one to do in cats that are losing weight. And in theory, we think that cats with exocrine pancreatic insufficiency will have the typical signs of diarrhea and weight loss and things like that. But cats with exocrine pancreatic insufficiency are not like dogs, and we know that cats are not small dogs. But this is yet another example of why they are not, because cats with EPI are incredibly resistant to diarrhea. So dogs with EPI have got incredible amounts of diarrhea. Cats with EPI are actually potentially quite modest, and sometimes the owner doesn't really mention that it's diarrhea, even if it is softer than it should be. So important that even if there isn't the typical watery diarrhea, with sometimes fat globules in it, etc., we need to consider EPI as a possible differential diagnosis in cats with chronic gastrointestinal signs, and especially weight loss. FPLI is a marker of pancreatic inflammation, and it's not an ideal one, and it's one of those that you can potentially skip if finances are tricky or if finances are limited, because I'm not sure that it necessarily changes very much what you do. It may change some things, and we can go about that later when we talk about in depth about management. But the treatment of FPLI or the treatment of pancreatitis is actually just symptomatic. So that's what we really try to do with these IBD cats as well, just treat them symptomatically. So whether there's IBD or pancreatitis or both of them, then as long as we're supporting them symptomatically, then that's all that they need. As part of the diagnostic process, many times we try a diet. And we try diets in cats that are clinically stable. We do a food trial, and usually we consider diets that are highly digestible, that have a single carbohydrate source, and we choose either a novel protein that the cat hasn't been exposed to before, so that the cat, we know that wouldn't be allergic to that diet, wouldn't have already been pre-sensitized to those allergens. So a novel protein or a hydrolyzed protein, because that will break down all those proteins in smaller bits, and the immune system shouldn't be able to recognize them. Some of these diets are supplemented with omega-3 fatty acids. They seem to have some sort of anti-inflammatory effect. So, well, that's good. We're happy with that. And usually, when we start one of those diet trials, we used to say in the past that we had to do it for 8 weeks, and I could see the faces of the owners of my cats dropping, because the cat wasn't eating sometimes the food, or was eating not very well, or the cat is having diarrhea, and then we're telling them, go home and don't come back for 8 weeks until you tell me if the diet makes sense or not. So that can be really hard for some people, especially if the cat doesn't really want to eat food and they are like fighting, and we know that cats really are not keen on doing things they don't want to do. So what we say now to them is, if they notice a positive impact, then we carry the food trial on for 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. If they see absolutely zero difference, we can stop the trial within 2 weeks. And some people, so that's a bit more digestible for some owners. And that's easier. And we have seen that if there's zero difference within 2 weeks, it's not going to make a difference if we wait 6 more weeks. So we can stop at that stage and then consider trying another diet. We can consider adding probiotics potentially, or then we can consider the antibiotic route. The antibiotic route is mentioned on many books. I just think that in cats, it doesn't seem to really help them. Cats are not as commonly diagnosed with the antibiotic responsive enteropathies. That's more of a dog thing. But some people still want to do it, because if you don't use antibiotics, then the next step is steroids. So you've done diet, it hasn't worked. You've done, and then if it hasn't worked and you don't try antibiotics, there's no step in between you having to give steroids or then having to talk to the owners about doing a biopsy, etc. So some people really go for that, but on many occasions I just don't do it. And there's more and more information coming out nowadays of course the antibiotic resistance, antibiotic stewardship, that we need to really protect the antibiotics that we have. But there's also more and more information coming out of how negative of an impact antibiotics have on the microbiome. So they really, even if you just give them for a couple of days or a week, it can really have a long-lasting impact on the microbiome. It can really disturb the balance in the GI tract. So we really, if we're already thinking that we have an animal or a cat in front of us who already has a lost balance of their GI microbiome, diet and immune system function, if we are going to introduce another disruptive factor, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that we're doing that. So I'm just mentioning it here because it's in the literature, but it's mainly really taken from canine information. So most people tend not to use this antibiotic step in cats. So The antibiotics that we would use would be metronidazole, and then tylosin potentially would be another option. But good luck to those who want to give tylosin to their cat, because it's not a very tasty thing. It really, they hate the taste, and you need to mix it with food. And we are talking about a cat that is anorexic and is vomiting, and so good luck. By all means, if you want to try, then try. But it's not a very successful combination many times. In theory, some of these antibiotics may have also immunomodulating effects. So who knows? Maybe we are missing some effect that works in some cats. But actually, what I tend to do, and I do this at the stage of introducing the diet, or sometimes afterwards, if I want to do one step at a time, is just give probiotics. And probiotics are usually a mixture of bacteria that are given to try to restore the balance. So it's a mixture of good bacteria that are there and are given orally, and allegedly they restore the balance, or they help with the loss of balance in the microbiome, or in the gastrointestinal microbiome. So there's loads of them out there. In veterinary medicine, a bit of a mistake that has been made is that we've been using single probiotics that only include one strain, so Enterococcus faecium or something like that, just one type of one strain of bacteria. What we have seen is that if we use multi-strain probiotics, so different types of bacteria mixed in different amounts, that the effect seems to be better. And those are probiotics that are used in human medicine. So there's more and more research coming out that is showing that actually using multi-strain probiotics is better, and using human probiotics, because they contain a higher amount and a higher variety and diversity of bacteria, then they seem to have a better effect. So the ones that I use in cats are it's called VIVOMIX or VISBIOME. So it depends on which part of the world you are. If you're in Europe, it's VIVOMIX. If you are in the US, it's VISBIOME. And we usually use about a quarter of a sachet twice daily, sprinkle it on the food, and cats usually don't really notice the taste or anything like that. And we usually would do a 2 to 4 week trial. If you do antibiotics, you would also do 2 to 4 weeks, but if you do probiotics, that would also be the trial that you would do. And my success has been mixed. I've had some cats that have really benefited from probiotics, and we haven't had to go further down the steroids or biopsy lines. And those tend to be perhaps younger, and those tend to be perhaps those cats that have had loads of antibiotics in the past. And then their microbiome has been disrupted, and then that has created some sort of domino effect, like I was saying earlier, that has created some chronic inflammation in the GI tract. So it's definitely worth trying it, and it doesn't work in every cat, but definitely a good tool to have in your toolbox of those tricky cases. So what happens if nothing works, or what happens if you have a cat who is vomiting so much and is so anorexic and so underweight that you don't really have time to do, let's do just 2 weeks of a food trial, let's then do 2 to 4 weeks of antibiotics, and then see what happens. So sometimes the cats that come to us are seeker than that, and sometimes we really want to have more information early on, and on those cases you would recommend a biopsy straight away, and so without even necessarily doing the food trial and things like that. Is the minority of them. Cats with IBD tend to present, like I said, on a more chronic and subtle way. The ones that may present to you really acutely and really not well may well have lymphoma or something like that. But sometimes the owners have left it for too long, and now you've got a completely emaciated cat, and you want to jump straight for biopsies. Then I think that's also an option. There's 2 ways of taking biopsies, or endoscopic or surgical. I think endoscopic is the way that we do it more often, because it's less invasive. There's less risk of complications, etc. there are, of course, pros and cons of everything. So with the endoscopy, you only get mucosa, submucosa, and the lamina propria. With surgical, you get full thickness. And then usually if you do endoscopic biopsies, you can start the treatment straight away. If you have a cut that you've done full thickness biopsies, then it may give you the diagnosis, and the diagnosis comes back 3 days after you've taken your biopsies, and you know you need to give that cat steroids, but you need to wait for about 10 days, 10 to 14 days before you can give that cat steroids, because otherwise those intestinal biopsies, the sites, they will probably they will suffer from dehiscence and peritonitis. So that can be pretty frustrating, especially with really sick cats. If you really want to start treatment soon, then endoscopy perhaps will be your better option. With endoscopy, you can see whether there are mucosal lesions. With surgery, you really can't, so you just feel, and we have the surgeons feeling for the lesions, but sometimes it doesn't really feel particularly abnormal, so we could be missing quite a bit if we do it surgically. And then endoscopically, you could get stomach, duodenum. If you do a colonoscopy, you could get colon, and sometimes you can get the distal ileum, but there's no way you can get at this moment duodenum or jejunum, distal duodenum or jejunum or proximal ileum with endoscopy. So if you do an ultrasound of the abdomen and you find that those are the areas that are more severely affected, then perhaps surgery should be considered. If you do surgery as well, because we were talking about triaditis, biaditis, or whatever we want to call it, we can also get biopsies of the pancreas and liver, and those would be also potentially quite useful. So pros and cons, a lot of things to consider. Probably endoscopy is the first go-to that we choose, but the ultrasound is really, really helpful for that, because if the ultrasound is telling me that the pancreas is really abnormal, then perhaps I want to take that cat to surgery, or to at least recommend it to the owners to say, look, we've seen something in the pancreas as well. It would be really great if we could biopsy it as well. So what happens when we've taken the biopsies? So we've taken the biopsies, and the real goal of taking those biopsies is to really know whether there is inflammation or lymphoma. And that looks really easy on paper, but actually in real life, it can be quite tricky. So as you know, and if you haven't heard of it, there's always this controversy between pathologists. And if you would send the same sample to 3 different labs in a blinded way, it would probably come back with 3 different diagnoses. And that makes it really, really tricky for us as clinicians to really know what to do with those biopsies, because we're telling those owners, let me get your cat anesthetized and let me do a biopsy. But actually, when they come back, then we know that they are potentially not that reliable. So it can be pretty frustrating. There's ways to help with that. So we need to use a laboratory that uses the WSABA guidelines, and those are some guidelines that really try to almost eliminate the subjective factor out of it and just give really objective grading of every lesion, and then just try to help with that. And there's other techniques that we can ask later. But in theory, the type of inflammation that we can see is either neutrophilic, lymphoplasmacytic, or eosinophilic in cases of IBD. And then in cases of lymphoma, then we can have low-grade lymphoma or high-grade, or then so small cell or large cell lymphoma, basically. What people don't know completely yet is whether lymphoplasmacytic IBD, which is the most common one seen in the cat, whether it's a completely different disease from the small cell lymphoma or whether it is a spectrum of disease. And we think that is very likely a spectrum, whether in which the lymphocytic plasmacytic inflammation starts and it becomes more and more and more severe, and at some point it basically switches into lymphoma. So we think that that may be the case. We're not completely sure, but if you think about that, then you can almost understand why it becomes very difficult sometimes to differentiate between lymphoplasmacytic IBD and small cell lymphoma. It can be really, really difficult. Luckily, the treatment is not that different potentially, so luckily there are some tools in there that we can use. If we're still not sure, we can consider doing this part that looks for clonality. We can consider doing immunohistochemistry, and there are in the US, there are ways of doing spectrophotometry, although I don't know if that's available commercially. What I would say is that as clinicians, when we are faced with the choice of where we don't know if it is lymphoma or not, we are used with our aspirates of lymph nodes and things like that to consider doing a PAR, looking for clonality. But PAR has not really done that well in cases of IBD. So I think we need to be really careful with doing PAR in IBD cases. And doing immunohistochemistry is still my favorite thing. And sometimes, if finances are not an issue, then you do both, and then you kind of see whether you've got a clonal expansion and you've got a a subtype, immunohistochemistry type B or type T, depending on the markers that you're using. If you can do both, maybe that gives you more information. But if you can only do one, and that's very common because of finances, then actually doing immunohistochemistry is a better choice in my book. So in terms of the different types of infiltrate, neutrophilic, there was a recent study that found that neutrophilic IBD in the duodenum was associated with Campylobacter attached into the duodenal wall. And nobody really knows the significance of that at the moment. But in those cases where you see neutrophilic IBD or a neutrophilic infiltrate, then you may consider giving antibiotics that are good for Campylobacter. So things like erythromycin and things like that would be worth considering. Eosinophilic infiltrate is probably a very tricky one because it can sometimes be associated with lymphoma, it can be associated with hypersensitivity or parasites, and it can sometimes be associated with mast cell tumors potentially, associated with other diseases in cats like eosinophilic sclerosing fibroplasia, etc. So eosinophilic infiltrate is tricky, and that's when it really helps to do a full workup, and a very good physical examination. We know that mast cell disease in cats is quite tricky to be identified, but if we've done a good ultrasound, they can really already give us some hints that this is really not IBD, that this is a more systemic disease. The eosinophilic sclerosing fibroplasia is sometimes or most likely associated with the presence of big masses in the GI tract. So hopefully by palpating the cat or by doing an ultrasound, we should be able to identify those. And of course, in those cases, or in the vast majority of those cases, we will have already done a food trial. We will have already tried to get rid of allergic skin disease, and we would have already hopefully eliminated the possibility of parasites. So hopefully it's not that confusing, but that's why I was saying that doing this diagnostic process in a systematic way can really help us sometimes. IBD and the lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate, of course, has got sometimes a better prognosis than lymphoma, but sometimes it's really really irritating to treat, as you have probably seen yourselves. So summary, diagnostic approach, it really needs to fit the clinical signs that are non-specific. So we really go towards a diagnosis of trying to diagnose IBD or focus on that in cases that are vomiting, losing weight, or anorexic. We want to exclude non-GI causes. We want to then look a bit deeper within the GI tract. So by doing abdominal ultrasounds, considering tests of GI function, or considering tests to evaluate the pancreas if we haven't done them at the step number 2. In cases that are stable, you would deviate a little bit from this really straight path and would do diet, antibiotics, or probiotics, and then you would consider endoscopy or biopsies. And if you can't do that, then you would jump to treat for IBD potentially, because you haven't really found any other cause and everything else is compatible with it. So what happens when you've diagnosed it? Well, if this was one of the super urgent cases that you or the owners wanted to do the biopsy, etc., you need to make sure that you've done the diet trial, the probiotics, and consider plus minus the antibiotic trial. Although, like I said, I don't really do it usually, but you would go for immune suppressive therapy, and that's PRED. But what happens when PRED is not well tolerated? So we start PRED at 1 to 3 mg per kg per day for about 2 weeks. And then we are tapering 25% every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how things are going. And I don't really manage to stop steroids in the vast majority of my cats. with IBD. So we go down with the dose and then find the lowest effective dose, and we stay there. And that's really good news because we have found a dose of steroids that works. What happens if the cat cannot tolerate steroids very well? Some people say, well, you can give budesonide, and that's the dose. I've never had a cat on budesonide that has responded to it. So I'm not sure that that's a good option. So I usually don't really even reach for it because it doesn't really work. What happens in the cats that have really nasty inflammation? Remember that your PrEP, your drugs, need to be absorbed in the GI tract. If you've got a really bad inflammation in the GI tract, then you've got malabsorption of nutrients, but also malabsorption of drugs. So in some cases, you can give them dexamethasone for a few days, injectable, try to control that inflammation, and then you can start on steroids. And that can be a reason for the steroids not to work. So if you see really awful inflammation, the cat is really symptomatic, then consider starting the cat on dexamethasone injectable for a few days before you go on to give your PrEP. And remember that dex is about 5 to 7 times more potent than PrEP, so you need to adjust the dose. You would be given about 0.3 to 0.5 mg per kg per day to those cats. But this talk was about more than steroids, so let's see what other options are out there. Of course, immune suppression can be achieved with other medication. Chlorambucil is probably one of my favorite medications for IBD. And also, I reach out for it in cases where biopsy has not been possible if I've started giving PrEP and PrEP has not worked. Because chlorambucil, apart from it's an immunosuppressive, but it's also a chemotherapy or an antineoplastic agent. So it's going to hopefully help the cat if the cat has got also small cell GI lymphoma. So the dose that I use is depending on the weight, so 2 mg per cat every other day if they are higher than 4 kilos, or 2 mg per cat every third day if they are a bit smaller than 4 kilos. And then we try to taper it, and then the way we taper it is try to increase the interval between days. Some cats that are really awful to medicate could benefit from having about 20 mg per meter squared given every 2 weeks or so. So just 1 tablet every 2 weeks, and then the owners don't have to really get their fingers torn apart if the cat is really fractious and willing to be medicated. I don't like chlorambucil in younger cats. I try to use it in older cats because I think the chance of lymphoma is perhaps higher if the cat is older, but also because it's a mutagenic drug. So I've had some cats that have been on long-term chlorambucil for immune suppression, and then they have come to me with lymphoma in the nose, for example, and I never really knew whether I had maybe had an impact on that with the chlorambucil. So if I have a very young cat, then I try to use the next option, which is the cyclosporin or cyclosporin, 5 mg per kg per 24 hours. Sometimes we use a higher dose, 10 mg per kg. And there's always this thing where people say you need to evaluate toxo titers before giving cyclosporin, because cyclosporin is an inhibitor of cellular immunity, and cats that may have toxoplasmosis in a dormant state may have it wake up if we give them cyclosporin. It's an option to do, especially if the cat is an outdoor cat that hunts a lot and things like that. But it's always recommended to do it. I've had unexpected success with sulfasalazine. And sulfasalazine is something that I never wanted to use in cats because it's a salicylate, and cats cannot really metabolize them really well. But the good thing about sulfasalazine is that the salicylate bit of it gets really very minimally absorbed. Only about 30% of it gets absorbed. And what happens with it is that when it gets to the colon, the bacteria in there are going to break it down, and they are going to break it down into a substance with anti-inflammatory properties. So they have local anti-inflammatory properties at the level of the colon. So it doesn't work for small intestinal signs, but I've had really incredible success with cats that have had large bowel, so colon IBD. Really surprising. And I hadn't really used it a lot in the UK. I was always really careful, but cats do surprisingly well on it, and it can be also given long term. So I've had many cats that don't respond to steroids with large bowel diarrhea that respond to sulfasalazine. So definitely an option worth considering in those cases. Symptomatic management and support is very important. So cobalamin supplementation is very important. Folate supplementation, look, you can give it. I don't tend to give it because cats don't like being medicated very often. We don't really know if it makes a difference. Some people say that it makes them feel a bit better. And certainly if we look at humans with IBD that have a folate deficiency, they do seem to feel better when they get supplemented, but we haven't really tried, we don't really have any big studies out there in cats. So I don't tend to use it. I'm just happy if the cat takes the steroids or the sulfasalazine or the probiotics or whatever. And on a cat that is sort of mildly anorexic or whatever, I don't really want to be bothering the cat with loads of different medications. If you've got a cat that is very easy to medicate, then by all means, you've got the dose in there. But it's not something that I push really hard for because I think there are other more important things. So if there's large bowel diarrhea, you can add fiber potentially. And if there are still signs of anorexia or a bit of nausea or still intermittent vomiting, then we give maropitant. And this is a very important bit of the puzzle. Sometimes at the beginning of trying a diet or sometimes at the beginning of starting treatment with PRED, because the inflammation will take a while to get rid of, but the clinical signs are still there. And if they're vomiting the PRED or they're vomiting the diet, etc., then it's very difficult to know what is working and what isn't. So I usually give it for a few days, 5 days or so, and then tell the owners to stop it and see what happens. Sometimes the disease is better controlled if we give it, but I tend to, if I need to give him maropitant, then I think about other strategies. So I think about adding chlorambucil or adding cyclosporin, etc. It depends on whether the cat looks like it's happy in that balance and is gaining weight, etc. In that case, then I might consider continuing on the maropitant, but having to continue maropitant all the time is a sign that the disease is not well controlled. So thinking about those other strategies that I was mentioning is perhaps good. So if the cat is not responding, so even though we've taken biopsies sometimes, we miss lymphoma if it sits deeper, especially if we've taken endoscopic biopsies, it can sit deeper in the mucosa. So we can try to add chlorambucil, like I was saying, and then consider that this cat could be having triaditis or biaditis. So consider potentially antibiotics for cholangitis, consider an enzyme supplementation if we're worried about endocrine pancreatic insufficiency, consider oral buprenorphine if we think the cat is painful in the abdomen, and things like that. So actually, having to add other things to help the clinical signs of the cat is not a big issue. I think what we really want to see with these cats is that they are gaining weight, that the vomiting is perhaps decreasing in frequency, and that the diarrhea, if it is present, is getting better. And sometimes it's not only steroids that we need to give, but it's also, as I was saying, either maropitant or other medication to try to make them feel better. But what about the last option that I'm going to tell you about? So fecal transplants. Fecal transplants is something that is becoming a bit more well known or more popular. It's certainly becoming more popular in dogs. But this is something that has been present for ages. So it's been present since the 4th century. And there used to be a popular saying in many centuries before that said, look, if you have diarrhea, you must eat the feces of your healthy neighbor. Now, I don't know what your neighbors are like, or if you like them a lot or not, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I like this saying. But it was out there and it was popular according to some literature. So, it's all, a bit gross, thinking about that, but actually there's a reason behind that. So there are reports in cats with chronic diarrhea, chronic recurrent diarrhea, chronic IBD signs, so recurrent vomiting and diarrhea, where it has been proven to be helpful. It's also used for ulcerative colitis in younger cats sometimes. And the idea is that by providing feces from a healthy animal, we would be inducing, so it would be almost a similar thing to giving antibiotics, but you're not using antibiotics, you're just using, you're recycling. Recycling is very in at the moment. So you're recycling some bacteria from a healthy animal and introducing them into the GI tract of an unhealthy cat, or cat with an disbalanced or out of balance microbiome, and that could potentially help restore the balance, or it favors basically a non-inflammatory microenvironment. So that's what it said. I've used them a couple of times in cats, and my success rate is not super high, I must say. So it's not something that I reach out for very often. I would reach out for it in cases where I've tried also chlorambucil or cyclosporin and PRED, and this is really not working, and nothing is working. So it would almost be a last resort for me. Perhaps we should do it more often, but at the moment there's really not that much evidence. There's more evidence for dogs and fecal transplants, but not so much for cats. But what do we need? Let's say that you are in that desperate situation where you want to consider a fecal transplant. So we need a donor, of course, somebody who is willing to give their feces, some really generous cat. So it needs to be healthy, adult. We want an adult because their microbiome will be sort of already reached some sort of balance. That takes a while until the cat becomes an adult and has a sort of nice equilibrated or balanced microbiome. So healthy and adult. If we can have an own housemate, then that would be ideal. And the reason for that is that because they share the same environment, we think that they probably share a lot of bacteria. And then that cat is healthy, but that other cat is not. So if we can just change only the bacteria that are not good, we don't change any other from different environments and things like that, then that would be potentially ideal. The donor needs to have no GI signs, needs to not be underweight, needs to not have antibiotics in the last 3 to 6 months, and we need to test them for infectious diseases. So leukemia, FELFIF, and we need to do, of course, a fecal and make sure that it's negative. We don't really want to have any issues with transferring unwanted things when we do the transplant. So some people do also fecal culture, and it needs to be negative for Campylobacter, Salmonella, and Clostridium. Some others don't go all the way to do this culture, and they don't really mind if there's Clostridium. But this is me. I'm going to show you some nice photos. So this is me. So what we need to do is we get the feces, and I'll get you the doses in a minute, but we get the feces. I hope this is not dinner time for many of you, but we get the feces in a blender and mix them with saline. You dilute them 1/4 saline on a blender so that you get some sort of little liquid solution. And then you put it into a sieve or into one of those cloths, like a cheesecloth or similar. And then that will retain the particles. You don't want to give the sort of particles because they can clog the catheter. So what we would be getting is what is sort of filtering underneath into this bucket. And then once you have everything filtered, then you put it in some syringes, and then you introduce it rectally into the cat. So preferably fresh feces, usually about 5 grams per cat of feces per cat, diluted 1/4 with saline. Then we blend it, filter, and then put it into a 60 milliliter syringe, more or less. And then we anesthetize the cat. We put them on right lateral recumbency with the back end elevated because we want the feces to stay in place. We don't want them to come down. We want them to stay in the colon. And then we put a red rubber catheter. We introduce it to the level of the transverse colon. And in order to do that, you just need to measure from the anus up until the caudal ribs. And you know that will be as far as you have to introduce it. And then you introduce the fecal material and rotate the body about 15 minutes in each position. So you do half an hour, usually a half an hour to 45 minutes contact time. So you put the cat on right lateral and then put the cat on supine, so on the back, and then you put the cat on the left side, and then the cat can wake up and can go home. So the risks are usually very low, usually anesthesia related. If you read some horrible reports from human medicine, you see that there are some people who die of sepsis because of bacterial translocation. But those are people that are usually very old and debilitated, and it's a very low risk. So it's 1 in, I don't know, 100,000 or so. So very, very, very little risk. And some cats may have a bit of bloating and a bit of discomfort in the abdomen for a couple of days, but that usually goes away. And we usually give them some maropitant as well when they go home, so that they don't feel nauseous or bloated. So so that's it, basically. So I think that the fecal transplants are probably something that is coming, and we may be able to perfect our technique, and we may be able to target those animals, those cats that will do better. But it's something that perhaps we don't necessarily do as a first option. We tend to do it as a last resort option, but it's definitely worth trying because it does help in some cases. As a summary, and I'm ending this talk pretty much. So the prognosis of those cases, so when we have those really awful IBD cases, what I tell the owners after I make the diagnosis is that about 80% of them will respond to diet plus minus medication. They may not go back to normal, but they will have a nice quality of life and a good quality of life. So the disease won't be cured, but will be controlled. Other types of IBD are likely to have worse prognosis, and trying to manage the owner expectations is key. We don't promise that the disease will get cured, because then we're almost setting ourselves up for failure. It's important to have the quality of life of the cat in mind. So, and this is not only from the point of view of try to avoid giving the cat too many tablets and too many medications, which is important. Also from the owner's point of view, of course, from the quality of life of the owners, but also just because sometimes we focus too much on the PRED and the chlorambucil and things like that, and trying to make sure that we're giving them potentially pain relief if we think there could be a triaditis involved, or potentially appetite stimulants every now and again, and things like that. Can potentially really help. So symptomatic treatment is useful, as well as potentially steroids or immunosuppressant. And it may be worth using this enteritis activity index so that you have a more objective way of measuring response to your medication, and whether you need to really take another step extra on trying to add other drugs or change the strategy if things are not going well. So as a conclusion, so IBD is a group of diseases of unknown cause. If you usually have a structured approach to the diagnosis, it's usually better. Histopath can be really difficult to interpret. So I also almost tell that to the owners, that it's always very difficult to rule out lymphoma potentially, that we haven't seen it, and that we are now starting from the point that it's not there, but it's sometimes very difficult to be completely out of the woods in that sense. Many cats may respond to diet trials or probiotic trials. If steroids are not possible, then we've got the option of budesonide, although I would, it's in the books, but, experience hasn't been very good with it. Chlorambucil, cyclosporin, sulfasalazine, a really good one to try when you've got GI, when you've got large bowel signs. And fecal transplant can really be an option in some of these tricky cases. And the supportive treatment is really essential in those situations as well. So we need to really remember to use it, and of course supplement with cobalamin whenever it's low, whenever it's below the 400 mark, like I was saying. Well, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, YAIZA. You should have read the comments of Paolo in the private chat when you mentioned the fecal transplant.
Yeah, I get it a lot. I get, it's awful.
So I can die. So, anyway,
I'm reading it now.
Amazing, very interesting. I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to take the scene from other people that might want to have questions. Stein, do you want to say something? You are here.
Yeah, no. Well. First of all, thank you, YAIZA, for such a fantastic overview of the disease. What you quite rightly say, it's such a frustrating condition at times, and we see these cases quite often with lots of stuff having been done. But key very often is a structured approach to trialing different things to try and figure out this cat in front of me. What of those three elements you showed really nicely between the immune system and the envirome, I think it's called, and the microbiome, which factor is the predominant factor. And if we don't do it in a structured way, you never find out. So thank you very much for such a structured overview, so that hopefully many people watching this can start following that structure and start to unravel what is the trigger in the cat in front of them. So thank you very much for that. Before we go to some questions, it will be really good for us to remind ourselves the reason why we're here. We're here to raise awareness about Ukraine, the disaster that is happening there, the criminal activity that is happening. And we are here, therefore, to not only listen to fantastic continuous professional development, but also to try and get some money together to help the humanitarian aid effort for our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And a little bird told me, the little bird is there again, they were so close to hitting another landmark figure, and we need 3 pounds. 3 pounds, so 3 pounds in order to hit that landmark number, which we'll tell you very shortly. But I think I can see that there are at least 199 people on YouTube. So if all of them, gave a fraction, so gave 1.3 cents to the justgiving.com/vet for Ukraine page, we would be there. Of course, you could give more than 1.3 cents, that possibly is possible for some of you. So please consider honoring YAIZA's hard work in providing us with an excellent talk by giving us the money so that we can pass it on to the Red Cross, who is doing a fantastic job in giving hope. And that's what they do, giving hope to those who need it most, those folks in Ukraine. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that. Very good. Yeah.
We have 199 people on YouTube. So you, the 199, if you have like £3 to donate, just help us to reach the 13,300, and maybe you have more. So, if each of you donates just £1, you make a lot of money. So don't forget to donate. Whenever you listen to this webinar, just donate. If you think the charges of each webinar is outside, so and if you think that we are doing this for you for free, is an amazing library that you have available on YouTube, also on Vin. So just donate.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
If you found the fecal transplant disgusting, please donate.
Very good. Yeah, and something that I failed to mention in the introduction of YAIZA. YAIZA is also leading the European department of the Veterinary Information Network, VIN, who very recently were kind enough to give a little bit more than 1.3 cents. And maybe Paolo can remind us of that with a little pill. Paolo, are you ready?
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to say is, and Laurent was rightly saying, it's not a competition, right? So there are a few initiatives. There was also a great day organized by the Webinar Vet, like a marathon. They raised an incredible amount of money. So it's not a competition. but a bit of healthy competition is, of course, very good for the Ukrainian cause. So, Laurent, can you just remind us how much money you guys raised with the great neurology lectures?
Yeah, just over £13,000.
13,000, yeah. Fantastic. Congratulations on that effort. I mean, we can only dream of ever achieving that, of course. Sorry, the doorbell is going. Just a minute. I know this is live, but you know, YAIZA, can you just get that? Might be a middleman, I think. So sorry about that. I know everyone is waiting for Benoit to do a beautiful talk, but yeah, I think it's an important package. Maybe what's that?
It was a letter.
A letter.
Yeah, for Vets for Ukraine.
That's Vets for Ukraine.
Oh my God, what is that?
Yeah. Wow. It's incredible that they knew our address. Like, you know, it's becoming such a famous thing. We better open it. Wow. That's a large thing coming out here. It's a very large thing.
Look at that.
So, it's a very large thing that is coming out of here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Here, but it seems to be a check.
So what
It
says?
seems to be a very large.
Our colleagues of Vet for Ukraine 2022, and whoa! Oh God! So it's frozen now.
He's frozen now, so it couldn't deal with the big donation that came from Veterinary Information Network, specifically the European department, which YAIZA is leading as we speak as well. So again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount that people donate today, but please honor YAIZA with her fantastic talk and honor the people in Ukraine and yourself. Make yourself feel good by just giving a little bit to the greater cause. Yeah, Daniela, you had a question, I think, for YAIZA. I've got a few as well, whilst we wait for other questions to come in through the social media platform.
Certainly, YAIZA, I have questions, like a surgeon questions, basically. Okay. So, what I don't know if I've missed this first part. So it is my impression, or it is a fact, that so if I think about when I was younger and when I was just a vet student, so many years ago, I don't remember I was finding many or having many cats with IBD. Mm-hmm. So it is a matter that it was underdiagnosed at the time, or do you think, obviously this is a very delicate question, do you think that the type of diet, the commercial diets in the long term, is causing some issues? Because
yeah. No, I think that's a very interesting question. I think so. As far as I know, there are no lifestyle factors that have been identified. I think it was underdiagnosed before quite a while, also because people didn't used to have cats so close to them. Like some people had cats, of course, but I think that they maybe didn't pay that much attention, and it's a disease that happens quite subtly. It's progressive, and then it sort of keeps being very insidious for a while. But I do think your question is very interesting because there's probably loads of things that we are overlooking in terms of why this is happening. I think we probably see it a bit more, but I don't know that the factor is perhaps just the diet, or maybe that cats are getting more antibiotics now, or they've been getting them in the past 10 years. And that can definitely cause issues in the long term. So I think it's very multifactorial. And sometimes with all these multifactorial things, unless you do a study with lots of power, you can miss a lot of things. So the answer to that is I don't know, but I think it's a very interesting question that we should be asking ourselves. whether diet or other factors could have something to do with that.
Because you know, I one of the person, so that people would call crazy cat lady. So I have had cats all my life, and so I've reached like extremes where I had 7 cats or something like that, and I don't remember any of my cats has ever had problems in this direction. And now in the last 5 years, I've lost one cat that had low-grade lymphoma and a carcinoma, okay? And now the other 2 cats here that every now and then they vomit. Maybe it's a coincidence because I haven't done any diagnostic workup because I'm scared, but I should not say that. But so this recurrent vomiting every now and then, okay, there are the trichobezoar that are causing in long-eared cats, but I don't believe that the air balls are only the only cause of vomiting. So there must be something behind. And one of the 2 cats, for example, when she has like a pattern when she has 2 or 3 vomits in 3 different following days, and then I change the type of food. So I go to a different type of food, and then she stops it to vomit. Mm-hmm. And then after maybe 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, when she's 4 weeks of the same food, then she starts again until I change the food again. So I know that I should do some investigation. I know you don't you don't have to tell me, but yes, it's pretty interesting observing this evolution in time of cats doing this more and more frequently. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, you know, because and I think so. Remember also that cats groom themselves and groom each other, and there may be also things out there in the environment that we're not even aware, you know, all these things of these fire retardants and all these things that are lining the water bowls and the food bowls and whatever. We just don't know basically what we are as people being exposed to. There's all this issue with the super processed foods that we know cause issues in the long term in humans, and I think cats are not immune to that at all. If you think about it, a cat who is exposed to things in the dust that we're not even aware of it is grooming himself or herself. That's being exposed in the GI tract, and then they could be getting sensitized to it. But cats are way smaller than us, so proportionally to their weight, they are getting a much higher dose of whatever thing they are getting. So it will be very multifactorial. I don't know if it's just the diet or everything else. And I think your cat may be getting sensitized to the diet, so it may be more of an allergic reaction than, you know, IBD. But why is that allergic reaction happening? Is there
I think she has got asthma as well, so maybe the entire cat is hypersensitive to the word. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the airway and the GI tract, they're both mucosas, right? So there's the airway mucosa and so things that they get exposed to, then if they've got a mucosal immunity that is potentially abnormal, then they can become sensitized to things. So yeah, but I mean, it's a very complex issue because we don't know, you know, because all the 3 factors are so well linked together that we don't necessarily know which one is the culprit, because when you see them, all 3 are messed up potentially. So you just need to sometimes pick one and try to, you know, change it and then see if that works. And if not, then you choose the other and see what happens.
So do you think...
Sorry, an important point to make is indeed. Oh, am I still here? Yeah. Is that indeed you mentioned bringing up hairballs? It's sort of seen by many as a normal thing that cats do, but we as internists actually don't agree with that. You know,
we have lost you. You are on mute, Stein. You are on mute.
But in the meantime, Daniela,
I'm back again. I'm not sure my computer is doing all kinds of stuff. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me again? Fantastic.
We can, yes.
So yeah, that bringing up hairballs is indeed an issue that we don't agree with it being a natural concept, and actually it is a clue that the GI tract is not coping with what is normal contents, and that should be passing through normally, yet for some reason or the other is not happening in the first place. So many owners see it as normal. We see it as a red flag.
Can I interrupt with another red flag, which is a really good one, because we have just passed the 13,300 mark. So somebody has donated £5 since we've been talking, and taken us over the 13,300 barrier. So we are now at 13,302. Thank you so much for donating. This is
Let me see if I see who has been. Let me see. Nope, it's anonymous, but thank you anyway for doing that. So do you think that to give my sorry if I focalize the attention on my cat, so to give her Vivomix is something that I could do is before thinking about.
I think you can try it, but it sounds, in your cat, it sounds more of a dietary, of some sort of allergic issue or some sort of food based issue. If I look at the history, it sounds more like that. But I think it's
we can discuss this in a separate. I don't want to just take the attention on my own cat, so but we can discuss this separately. But thank you.
No problem.
So,
YAIZA, you mentioned in one of the step plans that antibiotics was one of the ways to consider treating, but I know you also have some other opinions about that as well, right? We're learning more about the microbiome, and we're learning that every day of antibiotic use actually causes lasting harm to the microbiome. So how can it then also be a treatment for an enteropathy? So what's your vision on that?
I think that so it's something potentially worth considering in dogs, because there are some dogs, especially younger, that will have antibiotic responsive enteropathies, but that's a whole thing. I don't even want to get into that because that's also very controversial. But this is not a common, it doesn't happen in cats very common. So when you look at the chronic enteropathies, they are now divided into steroid responsive, diet responsive, and antibiotic responsive. In cats, we are almost just talking about two of those. So we're talking about steroid responsive and diet responsive. So the antibiotic responsive one is an entity that doesn't really exist in cats. And there were some people that are still arguing in favor of giving metronidazole because of potential immune modulatory effect. But as I said during the talk, it's not something that I do or support because of the so potential antibiotic stewardship issues, but also because of the potential negative impact that 1 or 2 weeks of antibiotics can have in the long term in the microbiome of a cat. And if we've got a cat with chronic GI signs, we know that that's already affected, negatively affected. So we are then introducing another disruptive factor there, which is not going to help. So antibiotics are as an option on many books, but most gastroenterologists out there nowadays are just not choosing them, especially not in cats.
Yeah, cool.
I finally understood why do we have a blender in the clinic with fecal blender. I understood now after years why. I was like, what? Why do we have a blender?
And now you also know why your morning smoothie tastes just a little bit different at work than at home.
God. No, don't say that. Come on.
Very good. Yeah. My connection fell away for a sec, didn't it? And that was because I was dancing on the table because of the amount of money that we've got just now. It's fantastic, and that in such a special broadcast, not just because we've got YAIZA but also because it marks the start of June, which is Pride Month, as I said in the beginning as well. Pride is all about having the freedom to be who you are, to feel how you feel, and to celebrate uniqueness, diversity, and freedom. And freedom is what Vets for Ukraine is all about in every way possible. So we were going to have a guest as well, dear friend of ours, Kim Moen, today as well, talking about diversity and inclusion, and also particularly the topic of LGBTQ+ in our profession. Unfortunately, she couldn't join because of her mom being taken ill. So Kim, good luck tonight. I know you're in A&E just now with your mom. And thanks for volunteering, and hopefully we'll get you back on the broadcast later on, hopefully with good news about your mom as well. Our hearts are with you in this difficult time for you and your mom. So I just wanted to say that as well. Good.
Fine. Yeah. Let me see. Have we got any questions, Paolo?
I think Paolo has got another piece of art ready to be launched. So he's got one of those beautiful videos highlighting the start of Pride Month for us. Paolo, take it away.
Very nice, very nice. So we don't have questions. Probably people are still engaged with the Jubilee. So I think.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of more if that's okay. One of the things you mentioned, YAIZA, was using PAR to differentiate between an inflammatory condition and lymphoma, and I'm confused now. So I've seen the initial papers, and then some review papers, and then some more papers. So what is your take-home message on the use of PAR specifically in the cat on GI samples?
I think it's very unpredictable. So they did a paper with looking at young cats. Some of them were completely asymptomatic and had completely no signs, no GI signs. And some of those, they took some GI biopsies of those and did a PAR on those, and they came back as lymphoma, many of them. And then they followed them up for some time, and none of them developed any GI signs. So I think it's very unpredictable. But I think we also need to be aware that you wouldn't be doing a PAR on an asymptomatic cat. So you would be doing a PAR on a cat that has got clinical signs that are compatible and that there's inflammation. So I do think that it can be helpful, but I do think that at the moment it's still very unpredictable. So the specificity is about 30%, and that's less than throwing a coin up in the air, because that would be 50% basically. So I think that it's not worth the money. If you're going to do something, then immunohistochemistry is better because it potentially gives you more information. But what some people do nowadays is they do both. So they do PAR and immunohistochemistry, and then they look at both together. And if they both agree, then great. If they don't agree, then they believe more the immunohistochemistry. But then I think, well, why would you spend the money on doing something if it doesn't disagree with another test that you then consider better? Then just do the immunohistochemistry. But so I think that there's that is not necessarily the most useful test.
Yeah, no, and it reminds me of endocrinology, right? I'm always going back to my basis in that if you do a low dose dexamethasone suppression test to diagnose Cushing's in a dog that is never going to have Cushing's, you will have a lot of false positives, especially if they're ill for some other reason. Yet if you do a low dose dex, the same test in a dog that actually looks like a dog with Cushing's, is a Bichon Frise of 11 years of age with bilateral alopecia, then the positive test result means a lot. So I guess you are translating it in similar terms, but then with the PAR test in a cat that has other telltale signs of potentially having lymphoma, right?
Yeah, but I think there's still that bit of unpredictability about it. So even if you do it in the right population, where I think is more useful than just doing it randomly, I do think there's still that bit of unpredictability, and you would always then base yourself on your clinical signs and perhaps another test, and then you wonder whether it's worth doing it or not, basically.
Yeah. So the PAR is the 3T4 of IBD and lymphoma. That's a joke for endocrinologists. Daniela, just ignore us. Just ignore us. Very good. Cool. Yeah, no. And then diet-wise, so if we have, a cat at the beginning stages and we do want to try the diet, but they're not eating well, how do we get them to accept the diet so that the diet actually stands a chance?
So I think in those moments, using symptomatic treatment, so using potentially appetite stimulation, using antiemetics for potential nausea that we don't know they are feeling, is good. But I think cats are just difficult sometimes because they don't want to eat the diet that we are asking them to eat or that we want them to eat. So trying different options, considering those symptomatic treatment options associated with that. You want to try that for a few days, right? Because you don't want them to, you want to know if your diet is working or not. So if they stop vomiting, it shouldn't be because of the maropitan that you're giving them, but because of the diet itself. So I usually do it for about 5 days or so and then try to discontinue and see what happens. But it can be very tricky. And, it happens also with some dogs as well, that they just don't want to eat and they are very picky, and cats are smarter, as we know. So it can happen sometimes. I don't know if you guys have other tips.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, it's something that I discuss with owners now and again as well. And if we're really stuck, we sort of need to make a decision together with the owner. Do you want me to do further diagnostics? Yes or no? If I were to do diagnostics and we were to find lymphoma instead of IBD, would you consider more aggressive treatment against lymphoma? And if they then say no to that question, we can go back to the initial phase and say, well, if we're never going to get biopsies because actually we're going to not treat significantly differently your cat because you're not up for that, then in a way we can start a little bit earlier with maybe short-term anti-inflammatory strategies. I don't know. It always feels a little bit odd as a medic, to then go down the road of empirical treatment, especially when it's concerning steroids. But practically speaking, if it has been discussed really carefully, I would consider that if again, they have said, I'm never going to do biopsies. I'm never going to treat a lymphoma as such. Although, we can talk about the differences between feline lymphoma treatment, small cell, and IBD, which of course can be quite similar as well. So yeah, at times I do consider prednisolone and a diet short term to hopefully drop the prednisolone, and then hopefully the diet will do the rest. But yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah, no, I think that's an option as well. But I try to not use it if I can get away with using maropitant for a few days and then diet. But it's a good option for sure. A short course of pred can help sometimes.
Do you think they experience pain, and do you think it's therefore worthwhile doing something about pain medication when they are suffering from a particularly active bout of inflammation?
I think buprenorphine is an option. You can give it sublingual as well in cats, so that the owners can do at home. I mean, I think it's uncomfortable. Like whenever we have, some GI inflammation, we've got cramps and we've got, it doesn't feel good. You feel bloated even if you don't have cramps. You just feel uncomfortable in your abdomen. So I do think that's potentially an important thing, but I just don't know whether that gets alleviated by buprenorphine. As we know, maropitant can have some also potential anti-inflammatory effect and some other substance P mediated effect, and that may also have some positive impact in them. But I do think that pain and discomfort and those things are very important and are a very key bit of managing the disease, and that's why I wanted to really make sure that people are on top of those clinical signs, because sometimes we forget about those and we focus too much on the pred and things that are not working, but we forget about some other symptomatic things.
Yeah.
YAIZA, you spoke about biopsies. Okay, so you mentioned that based on the ultrasound, so if the ultrasound shows some changes in the proximal, small intestine or colon, then so it would make sense to do endoscopic biopsy. Otherwise, we could consider surgery for full thickness biopsies. So now the question is, when we do take endoscopically the biopsies, so you said, no, we are not doing a full thickness. Do you have cases where you do reach the diagnosis despite you don't have a full thickness biopsy, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do. It's just that you never know for sure whether you're missing lymphoma deeper down, and you. That's always the thing. But to be honest, with full thickness, you also don't know, because you may with endoscopic biopsies, you're getting 6 to 10 fragments of mucosa, submucosa, and propria. With full thickness, you're not getting 6 pieces of each bit, So there's more people. There's now more, people being positive about the endoscopic biopsies, because you get mucosa, and mucosa is also a very important bit to diagnose, IBD, and with with full thickness you only get 1 bit or 2 bits or whatever, so you're missing a lot of the mucosa, which you do get with the endoscopic biopsies. So it's very rare that we jump straight for full thickness biopsies. I think it's very rare, and we do get the diagnosis, of lymphoma sometimes. It's just that you don't know for sure if you're missing it. But it's almost a false sense of security that you get it with full thickness. It isn't. You may have missed it because it's in another fragment of the intestine, or 2 centimeters above, and you don't really think about it. You think, well, if I've got a full thickness, I then have the full diagnosis. But that is also a false sense of security, because sometimes not present in all the segments, and you may just miss it.
So you would definitely, sorry, Stein, would you definitely start with endoscopy then?
Unless I see,
Yes.
unless I see something really weird in the jejunum, or something that I know I'm not going to reach, then I think starting with endoscopy is a very good option.
Even if the ileum, because sometimes they say that the ileum is the area where they, and with endoscopy you would not reach the ileum, no?
So you could reach the distal ileum if you do a colonoscopy. It's not easy sometimes to get through the ileocecal valve, but you could potentially. It's difficult, but in theory these diseases are, not necessarily very like all the beds will potentially, you will find pathology in pretty much all the segments. Even if it's more severe in the jejunum, you will still find pathology very likely in other beds. So I do think that endoscopy is still quite acceptable for a majority of the cases.
Yes, because as an owner, so I would be much happier to put my cat through an endoscopy than through a next lab with free biopsies of the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, and stomach, and blah blah blah. So I would be much happier with endoscopy only. So, but nowadays it seems that it's a trend to send these patients for X lab. So
no, I think I do it probably less and less. I think I'm easier now to do endoscopy than before. I think before we were very much focused on or at least me personally, I was more focused on getting full thickness, but now I think that getting higher number of samples also really helps, and it's less invasive, and you can start treatment earlier. So I think overall the advantages are probably more towards endoscopy.
I think it would be rare for lymphoma to be able to contain itself and not go to the lymphoma. So I'm almost thinking opposite now than I used to, where I thought, oh yeah, maybe I'll miss it because it is not deep enough with the biopsies. But I'm almost thinking opposite. Lymphoma is such a disease that likes to spread, that likes to go everywhere. So statistically speaking, we would be disappointed that if we do a good endoscopy with proper number of biopsies and proper number, and we can compare notes with YAIZA, but for me would be then duodenum at 3 locations, 8 to 10 per location. So we're talking about a hell of a lot of biopsies. Now, if the lymphoma, hasn't been spotted in those 24 to 30 biopsies, I think statistically speaking, lymphoma is going to be unlikely. Not impossible, but like in anything in medicine, we're often talking about likelihoods and statistics. So, I agree with that. How many biopsies do you take, YAIZA?
I don't take 30. I take about 10 in the duodenum, and I go into different regions, but it's 6 to 10. I think my number.
Yeah. Well, that's good enough. And then,
yes or not?
Yeah. So from each side, so then I would get 6 to 10 from the stomach as well.
And you don't go so via colonoscopy or not?
I think if the cat has got large bowel signs, then I would, but not necessarily. I think then the anesthetic becomes really long, and the cats then get really cold, and so we tend not to unless the cat has got large bowel signs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Paolo,
I think we had some questions outstanding, right? We had some questions outstanding. Maybe Paolo can remind us of some questions we had outstanding. Paolo?
Mommy, can we stay up late tonight? Please? Love you, Mommy. Bye.
Surprise!
Surprise!
Hello, I have a question for you. What are your favorite animal? And I love you, Mommy. You're the best mommy in the world. Bye.
Surprise!
Hello, my question is, when did you know you wanted to be a vet? I love you, Mommy. Bye.
Cute.
So, what's the answer?
So I always tell the kids, I always tell Ilse, that's our daughter, that she's a lioness. And I always tell Finn that he's a tiger. So my favorite animals are the lion and the tiger. And the other question is, God, I don't remember, but it wasn't as early as other people. But I think I was about 13 years old or so that I thought I wanted to become a vet. So not too young, but also right on time to start studying really hard to get the right grades to get into vet school.
Yeah, and did the profession give you what you were looking for as a 13-year-old?
Good question. It does. I do think that that there are other things that I was not expecting would come with the profession, and that's probably been quite that was quite a shock, I suppose, in terms of the lack of support sometimes and things like that. So that was something, the stress, the less nice things. And of course, you don't think about that when you're 13. You just think that you want to make animals better and that animals are nicer than people sometimes. So you want to really help them. So overall, yes. But there are other things that I definitely could do without.
Yeah. So if you were to then advise another 13-year-old, maybe Ilse wants to become a vet, like how would you see that? Your own children going into the profession, would you be worried or would you be encouraging?
I think that they always need to do what they want. Like if someone had told me at 13 that the profession was like I was going to experience it, I probably still would have become a vet. But I do think that that is good to discuss the less good things. So I would hope that they would go into it with their eyes open, and I would hope that now we are waking up to some negative aspects of the profession, and I would hope that in the future, for future colleagues, it's already better. So that would be my hope for her and for anybody who would want to become a vet.
Yeah. Does that drive you to be involved now in mentorship activities? Is that one of your driving forces? The fact that you were unaware of it and maybe not received the mentorship you needed?
Probably. I do think that I still was quite lucky to have some mentorship, but I see others who have absolutely none, and that they don't know necessarily what to expect of themselves. They expect too much of themselves, and I think that's a bit of an issue. But I wish I had dared or have somebody who had supported me to do surgery, because I never really dared. Like that was my most awful thing. I really became paralyzed, and like I look at people like Daniela and I'm like, oh my God, like I just don't know how they can do it. I was physically incapable, and I missed somebody who said, let's do it together, because I think I would have then been able to. Maybe I would have been a surgeon Who knows?
But you know that I wanted to be a medic.
Did you?
Yes. Oh, surgery was something that was far away from. So when I was at the
what went wrong, Daniela? What went wrong?
What went wrong? It went wrong. What went wrong is when I at the end of the vet school, I went to do an Erasmus. I had a scholarship for 3 months to Munich. So I went to the vet school in Munich, and then I spent 6 weeks with the surgeons, so in the surgery clinic, and 6 weeks with the internal medicine people. And I was still in love with medicine, and all my career has been really focused on more I don't like orthopedics, but I like the surgical conditions that are very related to medicine. So basically, it went wrong. Now you will laugh. So my experience with the medics was terrible. Because I was a young, nearly graduate student, and they were really not. I was just there listening to them. They were not involving me in anything. Whilst the surgeons were teaching me how to place IVs, and they were allowing me to assist during the surgeries. So this is to say how important it is to involve people in what you do, because if you feel part of it, then maybe you becomes part of that as well. So, and basically both the institutes, they both offer me an internship, and then I chose to do the internship in surgery. So and then this
the rest is history.
Yeah, you know what? Because where I did my residency was an orthopedic house, so we used to do most of the surgeries were orthopedics, and in my heart I'm a soft tissue surgeon. So again, the wrong way. And during my residency, I wanted to do emergency and critical care. So the plan was to abandon the surgery residency to do an ECC, but it went not well, because at the time it was a Royal College and Bern, and none of them wanted to offer me a residency in ECC. So I said, oh well, okay, I'm here, let's finish the residency in surgery. So I finished it. So but yeah, not really it was not planned at the very beginning. Absolutely not.
It shows you the importance of people around you, the mentors, or the people that do the opposite of mentoring, right? So it can be just that one person that comes in your life path that will start to really determine your life path at that moment in time. So I think all of us senior folks should be very aware of anyone in our rooms, in our vicinity, who might seem very junior or might not know that much, that we should always be kind, because we can treat many animals ourselves, but if we are kind to that person that is still growing, and we help that person, this person might treat and help thousands of other animals and might then mentor somebody else as well. So you actually start a cascade of positivity. So I always remind the brilliant people that we have in this profession to be brilliant about kindness as well.
To answer the question about when, for example, when did I decide to be a vet? This is another very interesting answer, because I decided when I was 10. And you know why? So there is, again, the history is the history of a cat. And it was my grandma cat and my cat as well. And basically she had an accident, and she had a fracture of her femur, very bad fractures. And basically we were not wealthy. So, and I remember me going with this cat in the transport cage to a local vet and asking about the surgery, so asking what they could do. We need to operate her on her. This cost X and Y. And then I said, yes, but my grandma hasn't got the financial possibility to do that. And that answer to me, 10 years old girl with a cat, oh, well, then we have to put her to sleep. So exactly. And this was the most traumatic, I still remember it like yesterday. It was the most traumatic experience. So, because this person that to me should have been the savior of my cat just wanted to kill her because of a broken leg. So when you are 10 years old, you don't understand all of this. And then, yeah, there was a neighbor that used to work to another vet, another GP. And then we went to them and they said, no worries. So you can pay in installments. So we can do the surgery, blah, blah. They were more supportive. And I spent, the fracture was horrible. The cat was very aggressive. So I spent a month. So she stayed a month hospitalized. And then I started the high school or whatever. So no, I was not 10, I was 12 or 13. And I used to go every day to these vets to assist my cat, to feed her and to help them. And in the meantime, I was looking what they were doing. And then I said, that is what I want to do. I will be a vet like them, helping animals. So this is my romantic view, helping people who maybe cannot even afford to. And this has been a little bit my fight during all my life, to in every place where I used to work, to try to have like some. Let's try to not to. So to have some financial support for those that cannot afford the bills of yeah. So I just want to stop here because it becomes a little bit more.
I think you don't need to say more. I think we feel you, and in a way, that's why I'm always sort of cringing a little bit when people say I'm happy to work in the veterinary industry. That word industry, the people who use that word, I think need to think again why they are in the profession, and realize that it's not an industry. So with all due respect, it's a profession that is based on ethical norms, and yes, we make a living, and yes, we need to pay our mortgages and all that, but there needs to be always at the heart of it some ethical principles that come down to what we think when we are that 13-year-old YAIZA or that 12-year-old Daniela, or I don't know how old I was, the 6-year-old Stein, who wanted to help those without a voice. And we need to make sure that all of us, as veterinarians, maintain that voice, and that we don't get hijacked by the veterinary industry, and we keep leading the veterinary profession, which is the most honorful job that probably will practice in our lifetimes.
That's sad.
Very good. Let's remind ourselves this is a special edition because it's the first edition in the month of June, which is Pride Month, and Pride, like I said many times before, is all about the freedom to be who you are. And in some countries that's easy, in other countries that's extremely difficult. And why do we talk about that? We are Vets for Ukraine. Well, there are so many parallels here. We know of certainly one country, which is the country that has invaded Ukraine, where it's not possible to be free about who you are, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues, as most of us are very, very well aware. That doesn't mean that in the rest of Europe there are no issues. There are several European countries where that's still an issue as well. So although this is a physical war that's being fought by Russia against Ukraine, Ukraine being a free European country who has its right to exist and to have its own future, we have other fights going on as well for freedom in our own societies, close to home as well. And Vets for Ukraine is all about that, joining those with a kind heart standing up against the wrong and standing up in favor of the right. So please join us once again in sharing what this campaign stands for. So if you don't have the means to donate money to justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine, that's okay as well. If you can share the message, that's possibly as powerful, if not more powerful, than any amount of money that you can give. Of course, we welcome the money, but if you could share the message as well, that would be good. YAIZA, you are in a relative frequent contact with Elena in Kiev, right? One of our veterinarian colleagues, which we know through the Veterinary Information Network. She's a VIN member, long-standing VIN member as well. She mentioned in one of the conversations, I think you mentioned as well, that it gives hope to them that people like us are just organizing this, even if it brings up, £1 or no pounds or no euros. Being thought about makes a difference. What did you take away from the conversations you had with Elena, YAIZA?
I think they are, very grateful that we are thinking of them. I think she's always been very, very grateful, and I think that it helps them feel seen, because I think it's very easy to go on about our lives, as normal and say nothing about it. And in some ways it's so out of our control that we could also say, let's just hope that it finishes soon and do nothing about it. But there's real people out there who are just really struggling, and actually people who are just going to work, was their sirens going off and all that stuff. And I think that if we see them, if we remember them, we are also giving them a voice as well, and I think they are very grateful for that. And again, I wish we could do more, but for them it's also quite nice. And she told me that her colleagues are watching our talks in Vets for Ukraine. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I think that's, I think they feel loved and seen. And I think that's a nice feeling, especially when you're in such a just desperate situation that you feel you're not alone. It really gives some comfort, at least.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Daniela.
No, I was trying to send a message on the other side of the camera. So because we are nearly reaching the end of this series of webinars, but if you are still enjoying our webinars and you want more, maybe just let us know. Just write a comment on LinkedIn or Facebook. Just let us know, because this will motivate us to keep doing our job to help our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. Just let us know.
Absolutely. So, and if our colleagues in Ukraine are watching this recording just now, do realize that a lot of people are thinking about you. There's no hour in the day that we don't think about what's happening to you, and we wish we could do more. And this is a very little effort we're doing. It's not about us. It is about you, and hopefully you do feel less alone, and you do feel that there are people who care about calling injustice out, saying what's right, saying what's wrong, and who are there for you in some sort of way. So please keep the faith. You're showing us what real courage is, by merely going about your normal lives. Our colleague Elena is working from a basement in Kiev, running our practice, seeing animals. And it's amazing. Such a stubborn attitude, such a bravery. just continuing doing what they are best at as well. You are our example. So thank you for that. Thank you for standing up for freedom within Europe.
Paolo is launching like a slideshow. I don't know what he has now, what he's planning to do, but
it looks like a collection of all the fantastic speakers we've had in this campaign, and it reminds us all the content that can still be watched by everyone, freely available online, and soon for the members of VIN as well. So we're hoping that when people look at this, they appreciate that and start sharing the links even more and consider donating on justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine, because every little bit helps. Every pound, every euro can buy that blanket for that refugee who is trying to make it happen, make the day go by. It can help with bandages, it can help with tents, it can help with gas, it can help with food, medication. There's a medication shortage as well. Distribution, of course, is very, very difficult in Ukraine at this moment in time. So all these money donated are spent really wisely by the Red Cross. So please consider doing that. Isn't that a great way to start your weekend? Donate a little bit. I often speak about the cafe latte that you could leave tomorrow. Instead, take some water. It's way better for your blood pressure. Spend the money on justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine, and you will go into this weekend a better human being. Wow, isn't that great? So do it for yourself. Please consider donating.
so let's see what is the surprise that Paolo is preparing for us.
Yeah.
I swear we are not aware of that. So
yeah.
Paolo, can you bring some light in what you are trying to do?
Paolo is our creative director, and we half of the time, if not more, do not have a clue what is being prepared.
We have
but apparently
one in Portugal from the
apparently we have a final guest perhaps popping up very, very shortly.
That friend in Portugal. Who might be this friend in Portugal? He's passing the frontier. He's a speaker.
A speaker from Portugal. He's at the airport just now, passing the borders. What would he mean with that?
Yeah, I don't know.
A speaker from the past, a speaker from the future.
He's a speaker from that we have.
From Portugal.
No, he's Portugal.
He's from Vets for Ukraine. Well, we should have paid more attention to the beautiful slides, because then the clue was in there, of course.
In Portugal for a congress. What congress do we have in Portugal right now?
Might be ECVS. Could that be the case? That is your neck of the woods, Daniela. Is the European College of Veterinary Surgery?
So is in Porto, but the congress is in July. Okay. Might be some ECVS that is visiting Porto for the congress.
Okay. Okay. Well.
Are we close to that or? And ECVS
maybe he'll bring the Queen. With Paolo, you never know.
The Queen is a he.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a bit disappointed now. Cristiano Ronaldo. Could it be Cristiano Ronaldo?
Ronaldo is not an ECVS, no?
He could spare his cafe latte, right? He could spare his cafe latte.
He has the glasses. What does it mean?
Yes.
He has the glasses.
Oh. Yes, glasses. Can we buy a letter?
Yeah,
Paolo,
exactly.
can we buy a letter, the first letter? Okay.
Okay, buy
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm going to donate. What amount do we have now?
13,302.
300 and how much?
Two.
Two. Okay. So we'll donate some more. What was the address again? Daniela, remind me.
www.justgiving. Paolo, can you put again the...
Right? And
Yeah,
that's
that's for Ukraine.
Yeah. justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine. Oh.
You buy, which letter do you buy?
Normally I buy a cortado. So, but today or tomorrow I will not buy a very expensive. I don't know what is the most expensive drink that you can have, and I'll do a ham and cheese sandwich with it as well, which I will not eat.
Cocktail.
So instead I'm going to give now. It's very simple, people. So I've just gone to justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine. Here you go. I'm on this page now. It's very simple. There you go. So, I mean, it's Friday night. It's the Jubilee weekend.
If you give now, you can choose how much.
Yeah, it automatically goes to 50 euros. So I'm going to treat you guys not to a round of coffees tomorrow, and therefore I will not spend 50 euros tomorrow, and therefore I will spend 50 euros today to the cause. And I will
so
say now, well, I need to buy this letter from Paolo, right? So it's he's
because I know it's
pressurized.
Sunday night, and we
just need to reiterate the quote from Bob Geldof years ago, which was, "Give us the bloody money."
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Okay. Give us the bloody money.
Okay, Prof. Dick White, I'm giving you the bloody money. Okay, I'm doing this. Oh, I need the CVV code. I won't call that out loud on YouTube, right? So that's probably better something I won't do. Okay, I'm going to get that code. It's in my wallet, so I'm going to leave the screen for a bit. That gives people the time. I'm going to give 50 euros, and please go to this site. I'm doing it now as well. If you do it with me, then maybe we can jump just ahead of the weekend, make a huge jump. Okay, so let's everyone go and walk to get your credit card. I'm going to walk now. Okay, and then when I'm back, you're also on justgiving.com/vets for Ukraine. Okay, everyone on Facebook, 1400 on Facebook. How many are 250 on YouTube? Come on, we can do this. Let's go to the page. I'm walking. You're walking too, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
He's coming. He's going to check his card. I'm witnessing it.
Yeah. Yeah, are we all there? There's my card. Have a look. Very simple, very simple. There we go. There you go. I didn't know it was so simple. From the last time I donated. Really simple. So really, actually, there's no excuse for people not to do this, right? There you go. Putting in the message. There you go.
We go for a little quick transfer, yeah.
Run through. Got one of those security apps.
Did you buy the letter or shall I buy the letter? I buy the letter D.
Ah. So you get to buy one and I get to buy one, right?
Yeah.
Then we stand a good chance of actually.
Well, I need to buy one as well, right?
Yeah. I have bought the letter D, Paolo. D like Delta. What? No. What does it mean no? There is no D in the name of the surname? No D. I need to buy another one then. We do hear the music, Paolo. We do hear the music.
Yeah. Very good. Paolo, I show you the bloody money, okay? I show you the bloody money. So I buy the B. The B.
Yo, bravo.
Oh, yes, we've got a B. So, okay. Did you, YAIZA, which letter are you buying?
I'm buying the E.
The E. So we've got a B and an E. The B and the E.
Like eco.
So B and an E. Benoit. Ah. Benoit. Is that right, Paolo? Do we have Benoit?
Has he crossed the border, or are we having to call the police?
Yes, cross the border. Okay.
Yeah, he probably was arrested for using his phone in the security area whilst making a donation. That's how tough he is, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Do we think we will still?
So let's see where we are now.
Stein has disappeared. He may have gone to help Benoit cross the border.
Benoit said, let me get the border and my luggage. Benoit, admire you for being at 1% all the time.
I'm not Benoit. No.
Anyway, so I just thinking if I have other questions for you, then YAIZA. So for how long
I mean,
does the fecal transplant, for how long does it work? Do you need to repeat it regularly?
So you can repeat it, 2 to 3 times, and they last for about, it varies, but 6 weeks is probably the average that we then start seeing that we have to repeat it. But the idea would be that you then do 2 or 3, and then you don't need to do them anymore. So it's not that the cat or the dog, because I've done it more often in dogs, it's not that the cat or the dog would become dependent on the transplantation every, 6 weeks or whatever. You would do a few of them, and then they become, they don't need them anymore.
Okay.
So it's not that horrible, you just do it, and it's not that you have to be doing it every week after that.
Now I will say something stupid. I cannot imagine the smell.
It's not something to do after lunch or something.
No.
No. Not the most pleasant thing, but you get used to it, like with many things in this profession. You get used to it.
Netherlands, Paolo, how is Benoit getting on? Because we are nearly 3 hours live, and maybe
an hour later where we live, so it's nearly tomorrow, Paolo. It's nearly tomorrow.
Exactly, because oh my goodness, it's 10 to midnight at your side now. Paolo, come on, they need to go to bed, Paolo. let them go. I try to call him. Give me a minute to call him. He cannot answer the phone, Paolo, if he's on the board. They will arrest him if he answers the phone. He's the boss.
Paolo is the boss. Yeah. Very good, very good. Are you celebrating the Jubilee weekend, Daniela, in a particular way, or are you on call?
I'm working. No, I'm working for lectures. Just that. Paolo is going to Italy. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Paolo, I think we should say goodbye to our friends. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. So it was a special broadcast because again, it's the first broadcast of Pride Month, and hence the beautiful colors of our screens here, representing the beautiful colors of people that we have in our profession and in the world, and who all need a voice, who all deserve a place, and who all deserve respect. And that's what it's all about. Being kind to everyone, regardless of who they are, where they are, with whom they are. There's always reason to be kind. And a colleague of mine, a past presenter, Vicky, a surgeon, who I shared an office with for quite a while, whilst trying to run the Queen Mother Hospital at the Royal Veterinary College together. She had a good saying that she reminded me of. When there's a choice between being right or being kind, always choose kind. And maybe that's a nice note to end this message on this broadcast, because that's what it's all about, right? Kindness. Be kind, and you'll find yourself in the most beautiful places with the most beautiful people.
Absolutely. So we have here that Benoit will listen to our broadcast from the hotel. So we just want to say hi, Benoit, and hopefully your journey is going well. And we are looking forward to having you back here. And take care. Thank you.
Very good.
Bye, Benoit. Have a nice evening and enjoy Portugal.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone. Next webinar.
Take care, everyone.
Next webinar is on GDV, and I think it will be on the 14th of June. We are trying to organize some other webinars in between, but otherwise we will meet again on the 14th of June with Simona Vicenti and the GDV. Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and thank you, YAIZA, for your spectacular, beautiful talk on EBD on chat. And thank you, Stein, for supporting me in this episode and for covering my later on. And enjoy the weekend, and thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Very good. Take care.
Bye.